Shri Radha Govinda Deva ki, Grantara Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki, Nitai Gopremanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading today from the second canto of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, chapter 5, chapter 5, entitled The Cause of All Causes. And today we are taking a look at text number 40 to 41. I'll chant 40 and then we can chant 41 together. Tat katyam chatalam kliptam urubhyam vitalam vibho janubhyam sutalam shuddham changabhyam tutalatalam. Okay, 41. Mahatalam tu gulpabhyam prapadhabhyam rasatalam Patalam padatalata iti lokamaya puman Mahatalam tu gulpabhyam prapadabhyam rasatalam Patalam padatalata iti lokamaya puman. Please repeat. Mahatalam tu gopabhyam Prapadabhyam rasatalam Patam padatalata Iti lokamaya puman.
Disappeared mysteriously.
Mahatalam tu gulpabhyam Prapadabhyam rasatalam Patalam padatalam Iti lokamaya puman. Mahatalam tu gulpabhyam Prapadabhyam rasatalam Patalam padatalata Iti lokamaya puman. Ladies. Mahatalam tu gulpabhyam Prapadabhyam rasatalam Patalam padatalata Iti lokamaya puman. Mahatalam tu gulpabhyam Prapadabhyam rasatalam Patalam padatalata Iti lokamaya puman. Mahatalam, the fifth planetary system below. 2. But Gulpabhyam, situated on the calves. Prapadabhyam, on the upper or front portion of the feet. Rasatalam, the sixth planetary system below. Patalam, the seventh planetary system below. Padatalata, on the bottom or soles of the feet. Iti, thus, Lokamaya, full of planetary systems. Puman, the Lord. Translation. My dear son Narada, know from me that there are 7 lower planetary systems out of the total 14. The first planetary system, known as Atala, is situated on the waist. The second, Vitala, is situated on the thighs. The third, Sutala, on the knees. The fourth, Talatala, on the shanks. The fifth, Mahatala, on the ankles. The sixth, Rasatala, on the upper portion of the feet. And the seventh, Patala, on the soles of the feet. Thus the Virat form of the Lord is full of planetary systems. Purport. Modern enterprises, the astronauts who travel in space, may take information from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam that in space there are 14 divisions of planetary systems. The situation is calculated from the earthly planetary system, which is called Bhurloka. Above Bhurloka is Bhuvarloka, and the topmost planetary system is called Satyaloka. These are the upper 7 lokas or planetary systems. And similarly, there are 7 lower planetary systems known as Atala, Vitala, Sutala, Talatala, Mahatala, Rasatala, and Patala lokas. All these planetary systems are scattered over the complete universe, which occupies an area of 2 billion times 2 billion square miles. The modern astronauts can travel only a few thousand miles away from the Earth, and therefore their attempt to travel in the sky is something like child's play on the shore of an expansive ocean. The moon is situated in the 3rd status of the upper planetary system, and in the 5th canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam we shall be able to know the distant situation of the various planets scattered over the vast material sky. There are innumerable universes beyond the one in which we are put, and all these material universes cover only an insignificant portion of the spiritual sky, which is described above as Sanatana Brahmaloka. The Supreme Lord very kindly invites the intelligent human beings to return home, back to Godhead, in the following verse of Bhagavad Gita. Abrahma bhuvanal loka punar avartino arjuna mamupaitya tu konteha punarjanmana vidyate. Beginning from Satyaloka, the topmost planet of the universe, situated just below the eternal Brahmaloka, as described above. All the planets are material. And one situation in any one of the many material planets is still subject to the laws of material nature, namely birth, death, old age, and disease. But one can get complete liberation from all the above-mentioned material pangs when one enters into the eternal Brahmaloka Sanatan atmosphere, the kingdom of God. Therefore, liberation, as contemplated by the speculative philosophers and the mystics, is possible only when one becomes a devotee of the Lord. Anyone who is not a devotee cannot enter into the kingdom of God. Only by attainment of a service attitude in the transcendental position can one enter into the kingdom of Godhead. Therefore, the speculative philosophers, as well as the mystics, must first of all be attracted to the devotional cult before they can factually attain liberation. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swavadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutabadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitangscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Kaurange Radhe Vrindavanishvare Vrishabhanu Sutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shrivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. My dear son Narada, know from me that there are 7 lower planetary systems out of the total 14. The first planetary system, known as Atala, is situated on the waist. The second, Vitala, is situated on the thighs. The third, Sutala, on the knees. The fourth, Talatala, on the shanks. The fifth, Mahatala, on the ankles. The sixth, Rasatala, on the upper portion of the feet. And the seventh, Patala, on the soles of the feet. Thus the Virat form of the Lord is full of planetary systems. We're now reaching the end of the description of the Virat Rupa form of the Lord, which you will remember is described as a form of meditation in one sense for the beginning transcendentalists, specifically the yogis. So you know that this is, to remember, explained by Lord Brahma to Narada Muni upon his question of asking who exactly is the supreme controller of the world. And therefore Lord Brahma explained to him the planetary system. We see that the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, actually now in the next, or close to the end of the second canto, then it will be described how the Bhagavatam deals with 10 topics. So those 10 topics are creation, the sub-creation, sarga, visargascha, sthanam, which means, could also be translated as, probably translated as the status quo, or the situation, how things are positioned. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that each of the 10 cantos after the second canto are dealing mostly with one of these topics. Not exclusively, but to a certain extent. So the fifth canto, as Prabhupada reference here, is dealing with this principle of sthanam, or what can be called the planetary situation. And we see a very elaborate description in this fifth canto about the various planets that are existing within this world, and also some of the conditions that we find there. And why does the Bhagavatam do this? Why is the Bhagavatam explaining to us all these various situations? And even here, why is it so described, how the world is separated into these various sections? Well, it is very important to understand, because basically the world is organized from the bottom to the top, from the smallest part to the biggest part. And you will find your place within this universe, and it will be given to you. You are ordained a certain position, and you are placed there by great universal laws, very powerful laws. And in the 5th canto we see it's not just in the little bubble, the whole universe works like that. That everybody is put in a specific place, in a specific situation, according to their destiny, and that destiny is given to you according to your state of consciousness that you develop. So we see here Prabhupada explains in the purport that it has to be understood, that by your state of mind, you will attain a certain kind of planetary situation within this world. And even then, if one has any desire to go back to Godhead, even that will be given to you. You cannot force your way in there. You cannot just kick down the door and demand that you are allowed in. This doesn't work like that. You have to be placed there by higher authority. And that is very important to understand. A large part of the modern world, in the modern world we see that nominally we have taken out all kinds of social barriers, supposedly. In the past, the universe or the world, human world, was very clearly organized. And according to your caste or your position, it was very rigid to where exactly you were placed. And we see that it became a little too rigid because it was based on birth, as Prabhupada said, and then it became, the system didn't work so well. And then people rebelled and broke down the whole system. And now the idea is that you can go wherever you want, technically. Except to be the President of the United States, unfortunately, you have to be born as an American citizen. But beside that, you can become more or less what you want to, in theory. Like technically any one of you could become a senator, or you could become a big businessman. There is no official bar from you entering into that position. Even nowadays we see that being a woman or a man doesn't really matter that much. In the past, even if you were just born a woman, so many things, you couldn't go to the military, you couldn't do so many things you couldn't do. But now we have removed all technical restrictions and we said, no, you can go wherever you want to. But practically it doesn't actually work that way, because we see that mostly it still depends now, to a certain extent, depends on money. You can do anything that you want to if you can pay for it, which is actually quite a big barrier, a very big barrier in fact. So we see that the principle is always there, that to attain any position, there's some price you have to pay to move there. And even if we artificially try to say everyone can go anywhere, it still doesn't work that way. We see people will always be constricted by something or another. And if it is not arbitrary social norms, then it will be just the fact that you don't have any money to go anywhere else, and you can't afford to get into a certain position. Now it is important for us to understand that in devotional service also this principle is there. If we understand that our position in this world is determined according to the state of our consciousness, well then the next very natural question is, well, how do I get that? How do I change my state of mind? And the whole process of devotional service is given to us as a means by which we can, you could say it is a technology in one sense, by which we can engage in such a way we can try to change our mentality. By changing our mentality, we will change our position that we occupy within this world. But the most important means by which to change our mentality is very clearly described as the association of those who have the mentality that you seek. So just like we see in the universe, how the universe is divided up into these various planetary systems, and that each of these planetary systems, they are inhabited by individuals who have more or less a similar kind of mentality. That's what brings it together. That's how the world is organized. But it is also very scary to think about it, because it means that if you have a certain kind of mentality, then you will be pulled towards those kind of people. And if you want to change that mentality, you have to really push very hard to get out of that association, enter into another kind of association. And that really is the struggle of devotional service, is to somehow try to enter into the orbit, the association of those individuals that are more advanced than you are. We see that even, to use the analogy of space travel as Prabhupada put it here, we see that if you want to go to the moon, whether they have or not, we will leave that there. But if you want to go away from this planet, you'll see that you need a rocket. Why is it that you need a rocket? Because you have to overcome the gravitational pull of this planet that is pulling everyone, that keeps everyone here. And then you have tons and tons of fuel that has to be launched so that you can somehow push out of that orbit. And at a certain point then you exit the atmosphere of the Earth. And then you're free to a certain extent. And then you can move on. That's what the rocket is just meant to pull you out of that thing. So similarly, the pull of the modes of nature pulls you towards a certain kind of association. And to somehow break free from that is very difficult. It requires a certain amount of energy that has to be invested. But that is how it works. So therefore it's important to understand, just to see how everything is organized. And even in devotional service also, to enter into the association of devotees is very wonderful. But even amidst the association of devotees, there are differences. There are differences in the level of seriousness and practice that individuals have. And the idea is one always has to aim as high as you can. Avail yourself of positive association when it is available. And understand that there is a certain discomfort in associating with those individuals that are more advanced than us, on both sides. The modes of nature are made in such a way that it is uncomfortable for one mode to associate with another mode, because there will always be a fight for superiority. If you have two modes mixing together, Krishna makes it clear in the 14th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, how the modes are always vying for superiority, because you cannot have them existing at the same time in the same place. If you put a passionate person and a mode of goodness person in the same room, there will be a war for supremacy. Who will win? Because either passion is loud, it's self-centered, it is dominating, it is not concerned for any barriers or boundaries. And that's passion, always eroding boundaries. That's why Lord Brahma explains it to be very vicious. And a mode of goodness person will be regulated, organized, clean, generally more sensitive and considerate. So therefore, if passion and mode of goodness comes together, it is uncomfortable, and something has to give. So therefore we see that the principle is that if one is then trying to enter into a higher level of association, one has to also understand that it is always relative. In one kind of situation, you might be the subject person, but then you enter into another association and you are the tamasic one, because it is always relative according to what your level of realization is and who the people you are associating with. As they say, if you are the smartest person in the room and you're in the wrong room, then you should go somewhere else. You should go there where you have to work to attain that association. So it is therefore very important to understand that there's a certain kind of discomfort that will be there with us when we enter into the association of those who are more developed than us. And there's a special part of our culture that allows us to deal with this reality. And this is the principle of respect. The more one can cultivate an attitude of respect, the more one can enter into association that one is otherwise not really qualified for. Because that respect is in one sense the mechanism that protects you from pushing other people away. Because that's what will happen. You will see that association is very interesting because it is not merely about being with other people. It's not even merely being able to speak to them. There's a certain kind of point where another person allows you into their world, you see. But you can never force your way into someone else's world. You can never force someone else to be your friend, for example. It's very interesting to see how people deal with friendship, because you see within Krishna consciousness, friendship is one of the most important parts. If you can become friends with devotees, then 90% of your problems are solved. If you do not have any good friendships with devotees, then your whole spiritual life is tottering on the edge. You're actually just waiting to fall down into depression or anxiety or whatever your state of mind is. Because it is friendship with devotees is the thing that allows the whole process of devotional service to become possible. Because the whole process of devotional service depends on a certain exchange of ras, a certain kind of exchange. And that is the thing that makes it worthwhile. It is there that the pleasure in devotional service is to be found. So if there's no friendship in devotional service, where will you get the ras? Where will you get the juice? And in the absence of that juice that can come from the interaction between devotees who are both friends, then one will have to find it somewhere else. And most likely you will try to find it on the internet. In some form of sense gratification will then have to be there to substitute that. So to learn how to properly associate with other people is very important. And the basic principle that is there, that guides all Vaishnava relationships, is the principle of respect. But that respect doesn't just mean the formalities, it's very important. It doesn't just mean the formalities of folding your hands and saying certain things like Prabhu or Mataji. I don't even know if we're allowed to say Mataji anymore. But the principle is there of, to use respectful terms. Really, one has to really work a little very hard to somehow conquer the hearts, even of friends. What is fascinating in devotional service when it comes to friendship is that there's one thing that completely kills the mood. It's an amazing thing. Like in romantic situations you see it, sometimes something can happen and it kills the mood and then the romance disappears. But even in all friendship it's like that. There's sometimes things that happens and it completely kills the mood. And then the ability to have an exchange of friendship, it just cannot happen. Because the interesting thing is that it cannot be forced. Like to be polite to another person, you can always do that. But to really extend yourself in friendship to another person, it is not just something that can artificially be done. It has to really come from the heart. So certain conditions have to be there for the heart to open up properly, to have that exchange from both sides. Now the one thing that completely ruins any attempts that you might have to properly associate with other devotees is disrespect, and specifically then also entitlement. To think that one is entitled to another person's time or energy or attention, that is the most unattractive thing that can possibly exist. And it will ruin any attempts that you have to have a positive relationship with that person. So even in our friendships in Krishna consciousness, when we speak about peer-to-peer relationships, that we know in our culture is that there's these three kinds of relationships. There's those who are senior to you, those who are your peers, and those who are your juniors. But in peer-to-peer relationships, it's very important to understand that even in peer-to-peer relationships, the basic pivot that runs that relationships is also service. So even in peer-to-peer relationships, there is a sense of subordination to the welfare and to the needs of the devotee who is your friend. If we mistake peer-to-peer relationships as being the higher devotees I have to be respectful to, the lower devotees I have to be a good example for, but with my friends I am entitled to their friendship, then also it won't work. So even in such a basic thing as the Vaishnava friendships, the basic principle there also is you have to serve the other person. So you have to exert yourself to really try to be respectful and to serve them as if you are their servant. So you do not choose your friends. Other people choose you to be their friend, but you are their servant. From your perspective, you are the servant of everyone. And then some Vaishnavas that you serve, they will treat you as if you are their friend. And then you can be very grateful for it, but from your own perspective, you are their servant. But somehow they are merciful enough that they treat you as a friend. And that is actually the dynamics that allows for Vaishnava friendships to happen. But the moment that you consider another person and you take them for granted, and you think that, this person is obviously just like I am, then the spiritual core of the relationship doesn't really function very well. So very fascinating to see that this mentality of respect and service, it actually powers all relationships. And when you have two Vaishnavas that come together and that are then able to both mutually see one another as the servant of the other person, you see yourself as the servant of the other person, but at the same time you see the other person, they treat you as a friend, then there is this exchange of devotional friendship. that can then properly happen. But one has to always be careful of it. All relationships, Vaishnava relationships, in one sense, are very fragile, right? Especially while we are in the material world, because it is very natural, especially as the modes of nature make their fluctuations, that one can cause offense, or even just, we see, it is explained that even if one sees another Vaishnava and one is not happy, even that is offensive. Even that is the root cause of offense. The root cause of offense is even just being neglectful of another person. So very simple, the disrespectful mentality is very easy to manifest. But it's not difficult to overcome it. It just means to have a service attitude. As Prabhupada says here, that's what we have to understand, that only by attainment of a service attitude in the transcendental position can one enter into the kingdom of Godhead. So entering into the kingdom of God happens even within this world. The moment that two individuals can associate on the Vaishnava platform, then both of them has entered into the kingdom of God. Because what is the difference between being with Krishna or being with the Vaishnava? We see that the Vaishnava is a representative of Krishna. So to somehow enter into Vaishnava relationships allows us to move to another dimension. And that is what makes it possible to sustain our participation in Krishna consciousness. And if we're not properly entering into those relationships, then what will happen is your heart will dry up and you will start looking for something else. And what exactly you will look for, that will be dependent on your conditioning. And then what will happen is you will go look for that thing, and then you will be placed somewhere in the 14 planetary systems, according to what exactly that thing is that you are taking shelter of. But it definitely will not be devotional service and the relationship with devotees. So therefore, very interesting that this, even as we hear this description of the material universes, to understand the dynamics surrounding it. And we have to then really try to think where exactly it is that we want to go, and try to cultivate the kind of mentality that will allow us to enter into proper association into these different worlds. And in that way, our experience in Krishna consciousness will become much more exciting. Now we see, I would like to, a very wonderful verse that really facilitates. One has to understand the problem with spiritual people in general, one of the difficulties in associating with them, is that people have a certain kind of, all of us to a certain extent, we have a certain kind of wall around us that protects us from enviousness. The material world is full of envy. And that's what the world is. It's predominated, saturated. The background of the material energy is envy. So all of us, we learn how to protect ourselves to a certain extent from other people. Because other people, was it Jean-Paul Sartre says that hell is other people. It means that other people are the source of most of your troubles, actually. So therefore we learn to protect ourselves. So that is a function of the material ego, is protection, defense, especially protecting us from one another. And, but even Vaishnavas, we have to protect ourselves, because there's so many crazy things that happen in this world, even within this society. Sometimes this envy also enters in, and then one has to protect oneself from that. And how do you protect yourself from that? You keep a distance. Not necessarily a 6 feet distance, a social distance, but a distance of the heart, where you just avoid another person. You avoid entering into any kinds of exchange with them. You keep it very formal, very distant. So that way you protect yourself. So spiritual people, especially as people become spiritually more advanced, they also become more sensitive. And therefore they also have to protect themselves. They become more careful about how they associate and who they associate with. And to somehow then allow them in, and that is the difficulty. But we see that here, in a few places in the Bhagavatam, we obviously see so many sages, so saintly individuals. So saintly individuals are interesting because they also protect themselves to a certain extent, but they are on the lookout for signs of hope. If they see signs of some form of sincerity, or some desire at least to do devotional service, then they are willing to extend themselves, at least to give it a shot. And that's what we see, that's what the mood of the preacher is. We see Srila Prabhupada is the exemplification of that. He came towards a place where otherwise the lower modes really predominated. But wherever he saw some little symptoms, some little signs of some interest in transcendence and in spiritual service, then he was willing to extend himself and, as he called it, fan the sparks. So that's what he said. He says, because at heart, all individuals have some desire to render service. So the spiritual, the saintly people, they catch that and they fan it and they try to cultivate it. But from our perspective, we can adopt a certain kind of mentality that will increase the likelihood that we will be the recipient of the mercy of the great Vaishnavas. And as I'm saying, the real mercy is then that they will somehow allow us in, and not keep a distance from us, but allow us in and allow us into their world and share with us what exactly is their experience, which is really then at that point. The problem in our situation is that we are looking at Krishna with dead eyes that are